Welcome to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm Christian Marquez, founder and CEO of Finstrat Management. At Finstrat, we provide CFO-led accounting, finance, and reporting services to assist clients monetize their business. Stick around to the end of the podcast and I'll share how you can be our next guest. Now on to the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Marquez, founder and CEO of Finstrat Management. Excited. Today we have with us Michael Johnson. Michael's the president of the New Jersey Institute of Innovation. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Christian. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So let's get started with Institute. What's the mandate and what are you guys doing day to day?
Yeah, great question. So it's easiest to explain the problem that we address. So in the US, over the last 30, 40, 50 years, we have a lot less basic research taking place in industry, and it's moved over to higher ed. But higher ed is difficult to work with for the outside world. It's tough to get a hold of faculty. It's tough to leverage resources. But when you look at the country, all of our resources for basic research and translational research are in higher ed. So how do we access that? Well, our organization was formed about 10 years ago to be a conduit between New Jersey's State Polytechnic University, NJIT, and the outside world. And we have a team of about 100 people across our organization that help with spurring translational research, fostering innovation, and upskilling workers. And the whole goal is to foster relationships by taking all the resources of the State's Polytechnic University, allowing folks to access them and utilize them. And we operate in a couple of different ways, but principally as a research institute and a think tank across our 4 different divisions. So we focus on entrepreneurship, we focus on defense, primarily advanced manufacturing for the DoD. We do a lot of work in healthcare and healthcare IT. And then lastly, artificial intelligence. We're trying to help companies, small and mid-sized businesses, adopt AI into their various workflows and tools and operations. Because today everyone's asking the question of how do I adopt AI? They know what problems they have that can be addressed by AI, but they have no idea where to get started. So our team of 100 folks helps across these problems and leverages all the great resources and great minds of the state's university.
Wow. And apologies. I think I got it backwards a moment ago. I think I said New Jersey Institute of Innovation, but it's the New Jersey Innovation Institute.
Same idea, but all good.
All right. So how long has the Institute been around?
So a little over 10 years now. Yeah.
And how long have you been leading the Institute?
I jumped into this role just about a little under 2 years ago. Before that, I was the CEO and co-founder of a biotech company that I launched out of my PhD work. Took it from 2 guys in a closet at Rutgers University up to a company that we sold to a publicly traded Swedish company called Bico. I stayed there for about 2.5 years as the chief commercial officer for a few entities, and then moved into this position after our transaction, our earnout was over. And really grateful to be running an organization that's so focused on taking cool cutting edge technologies and then actually bring them to life into products and services that impact the world.
So you got founder DNA. What subsequently drew you to serving as president as the Institute?
It is, yeah, it's very different. Running a company with 2 people and 10 people, I mean, it's a journey that's very difficult and very different than running a large organization, especially in a quasi-government type role. But for me, when I sold the company, right after we sold, our parent who bought us said, hey, go buy some other companies. And this is 2021. So the market in biotech life sciences was hot. There's plenty of money. And we went out and started looking at companies to buy. And we bought a company called Hurel. It was a life science cell culture company. We integrated into my company. And that company was actually in NJI's incubator. Yeah. So when I went to go buy the company and move them out to our facility in New Jersey, I met with their president at the time and learned about the organization. And I actually called my wife on the way home and said, hey, this place sounds cool. I'd love to work with them one day. I'd never even heard of them before. And then fast forward, our contracts were ending after we were acquired. So our earnout was up. And I was starting to think about new roles and new opportunities. And they reached out to me and I said, this is great. I know exactly what you guys do. I think it's cool. I'd love to talk. And it was right place and right time. And for me, my journey was taking intellectual property that my co-founder developed, turning it into products and services, commercializing it. So to be able to do that at a larger scale for NJIT and help lots of researchers, lots of faculty, it was cool. I'm a scientist by background, a PhD scientist. So for me, being able to help those folks get their IP out from being stuck in a university into the world, that's awesome. And every day we're trying to do that. Every day we're trying to create innovations that go out there and actually help people and change people's lives. So really cool role and very grateful to be in it.
So what are some of the, so now you're 2 years in, Any surprises when you got there?
Yeah, anytime you take over a new organization, it's someone else's baby, it's someone else's organization. And as you know, running a business, there's always problems. People within the organization aren't always aware of them, but you as a leader are acutely aware of them.
Sure.
So with NGI, though, in stepping into the role, it's a pretty smooth operation. We do a lot of contracting, though. So most of our revenue, 90+% comes from state and federal contracts. And negotiating that over the last year has been difficult, right? So there's all sorts of changes at the federal level with any administration. But as programs change, as priorities change, we have to adapt. We do a lot of defense work, and what priorities the DoD has today are very different than they were 12 plus months ago. We look at healthcare, we look at Medicaid, we look at cuts across the board for healthcare. That affects us as well. So that's something that I'm much more acutely aware of now than I was in my prior role, where it's totally industry focused, is how federal and state priorities change funding decisions and change programmatic funding. So very, very focused on that. Another piece is just how we as a country look at higher ed, and really we're looking at higher ed to create all the innovations that help patients and help people across the board. And just seeing how responsible we are for that. And as a country, how dependent we are on higher ed. So it makes the position I'm in even more important, because this is where all the things that we as a public are expecting to change the world actually come from. So definitely a larger sense of responsibility than I thought.
So let's unpack that. So I know you got your PhD. When did you graduate your undergrad, and when did you get your PhD?
I did my PhD at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, PA, and graduated back in 2011. And then
Okay.
did a PhD coming out of there. I took about a year off, and then did a PhD. And I wrapped that up around 2016. We
Okay.
were, my co-founder and I, we started Visicol, the company we started during our PhD, midway through our PhD. So it definitely delayed our finishing quite a bit. So we launched the company. We raised our initial funding while we were still in our degree program. And then I finished shortly thereafter. My co-founder took like another year to actually finish his PhD. But that was 2016. We launched our company right out of our PhD work at Rutgers, and then went from 2016 to 2021, built it up. We picked up all 20 the top 20 pharma companies as clients, and then sold it in 21. And what we were doing was drug discovery research. I use that loosely. My co-founder Tom invented a technology for imaging tissues. So
Oh,
like mouse brains and biopsies, instead of cutting them into like thin, two-dimensional paper slices and looking at them on a microscope slide, like high school biology class, he had invented a way to actually image them in 3D and get all the data from a tissue. And
hmm.
this platform we use to help pharma companies understand where their drugs were going, what they were doing, whether they're safe or efficacious, and built a whole platform of software and tools around that we were using. And yeah, super exciting ride. So about 7 years of actually doing that before we sold the company in 2021.
Wow. So pathology 2.0.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So histopath 2.0, and the paradigm that's been around for 100 years is a guy or a girl in a basement is looking at your slides and they're like, hey, I think you got cancer, super non-quantitative. And we try to shift that to a quantitative approach, get a whole bunch more data from tissues, and answer questions more completely and more accurately. So really cool technology platform though.
I mean, congratulations again. I mean, that's awesome, and talk about innovation. But if I can come back, so I'm curious. So fast forward to today. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but the what I read anecdotally is that admissions at many colleges throughout the country are declining. I think it depends on which gender you look at. And so, given your role, have you relative to your experience, have you noticed any opportunity, or what may be contributing to that, and what opportunities there are to address it?
You you bring up a fascinating topic, which is this demographic cliff. We look back to 2015 as really the peak of higher ed, where you had the most kids going to college. And you mentioned a good trend too, which is we look at genders, a lot less boys are going to college than they were before. Both are declining compared to where it was in 2015, but boys are more affected for a bunch of cultural reasons, which you can get into. But 2015 was also the peak for test scores. So we look back at the population that's going to college and just high school population in general, test scores have been declining. And this is even pre-COVID, and COVID has further accelerated that. But test scores across the board are declining. The number of students going to college are declining. So the population that's incoming, it's lower skilled and less of them. And that's a problem for higher ed. And we are dependent upon more and more kids going to college, more availability of funding for kids to go to college, where with interest rates going up too, loans aren't in the same position they were a little while ago. Meanwhile, costs in higher ed are going up 6-7% a year. And that's tough math, right? The math doesn't pencil out. So where higher ed is in now is you can't keep growing. So how do you manage higher ed and also keep the organization going? At the same time, the last year, we've gotten kicked in the butt with federal funding. So you're looking at NIH, NSF, and these things that support higher ed in a big way are also getting cut. It's difficult for students to get visas, foreign students, and that's where a lot of the profitability comes from higher ed. So undergraduate students, they don't really drive a lot of profits for higher ed. PhDs, you lose a bunch of money on them. And the master's students are where you make most of your profit in higher ed. And a lot of that are foreign students come to the US, which has been not cut off, but has reduced a lot. So higher ed is in a really difficult position. And I wouldn't be surprised you see a lot of higher ed institutions consolidating, combining, and going under the next 5-10 years. The conditions are not what they were.
Interesting. I would think, though, that, the schools like NGIT that have innovation institutes are an advantage because you can commercialize PhD thesis, products, service offerings, and really put yourself in a position where you can stay ahead of the curve. Is that true under the hood?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely that. You look at polytechnics, you look at STEM-oriented institutions, they're doing better than our liberal arts counterparts for obvious reasons that you mentioned. But on top of that, it's also return on investment. As money gets more difficult to acquire, parents and students are starting to look more and more at what is return on investment. If you look at a school like NGIT in particular, it's one of the highest, top 5 highest return on investment of any college in the entire country because very affordable, very high salaries. And if a student comes out making $90,000 a year and it costs them $10,000 to $15,000 to go there, that math is awesome versus spending $80,000 or $90,000 and still making $90,000. And that's real money to an 18-year-old kid who's got to pay that back at 7, 8, 9% interest per year, which for that $90,000 salary for those students, they can't do if it's $80,000 a year of tuition. So we see a lot more students shifting towards that. It's just much more economical. The return on investment is there. And schools like NGIT in particular are just very efficiently run. The organization is efficient. The education is efficient. So yeah, I definitely see universities like ours being more successful, especially as parents look more and more at the dollars as they need to.
How ubiquitous are innovation institutes at other schools throughout the country, and then how often do you compare notes with your counterparts?
It's a really great question. So lots of universities have institutes for innovation or accelerators or different programs. The thing that makes us very different is that we are a separate 501c3. So with our staff of roughly 100 people, we have a CFO, we have an HR person. All of our employees are employees of NJI and not NJIT. And what that allows us to do is actually move the speed of business. So when the Department of Defense came to us and said, we want to build a facility to test advanced manufacturing equipment from other countries, we can't bring it on military bases. Can you build that for us? Yes, we can do that. Can you also train students that we can work with and see who we want to hire into the DoD because it's difficult to hire? Yes, we can do that. But for standard higher ed like NGIT, really difficult to do that. It's just, you can't sign a lease for a building and build a building as a higher education institution overnight, where we can do that in 2 weeks as our separate entity. We have our own board of directors, our own bylaws, allows us to be very efficient. And that in of itself is very unique. There's only 4 or 5 of those in the entire country. And it's because I would argue most presidents of universities wouldn't cede that kind of power to another entity. And I give the former president of NGIT a lot of credit for having the foresight to do that, to say, we need something separate. We need something that's of academia, but not in academia, but at the same time can leverage all the resources of academia. That governance structure in itself is very novel. So a lot of what we can do, nobody else can do just because of how we're formed. For example, we have a venture fund and we invest out of it's about $12 million, and we're actively building companies with intellectual property from corporations and our university itself. And with that, we're making the decisions. We have an advisory board that's internal to our organization. If you did that in higher ed, your board of trustees, your deans, all sorts of people would exert power and influence over you to make decisions you probably shouldn't make, and it wouldn't be successful. So with us being independent of a lot of decision making, we're able to run an organization that is truly innovative in its governance and structure. So we compare notes with other folks that are out there. We're always talking with other folks in the ecosystem about different opportunities and partnering on grants and different things. But we are truly unique in that sense, especially in New Jersey.
As I'm listening, I'm thinking to myself that trust is a competitive advantage. And
Yes.
and I'm just saying it, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty intuitive statement, but in this case, maybe it's not because, to their credit, the structure sounds like it's giving you guys a tremendous amount of speed to take advantage of opportunities that you see in front of you. I'm curious on the venture fund, how is it structured? Is this fund one? Is there an investment committee? Who's making decisions on when to cut checks?
Yeah. So about 7, 8 years ago, NJI and NGIT, they recognized there was this need in the marketplace for cell and gene therapy manufacturing at a small scale. So the big guys, the Covances of the world, will do these 10, $100 million projects. But if you want to do a pilot project for a Series A or B company, there wasn't anybody to do a $500,000 or $1 million project, or at least very few. So they said, we got clean rooms, we have faculty in this space, we have people trained to do cell and gene therapy manufacturing. Why don't we build a for-profit company to do that? And as a 501c3, you could just build for-profit companies. You can't do it as a higher education institution, but we as NGI could. So they built this company. It was called Biocentric. They built it up. It was super successful. And they sold it about 3 years ago for $73 million. And NJI had intentionally been in this business of company creation and venture studio building very unintentionally. And when I came on board about 2 years ago, one of the first things I said was, why don't we just do that again? Why don't we intentionally get in the business of building companies? We have the smart people, we have the resources, and my position in being an NGIT and where we are, I can call any CEO of just about any business and get a meeting tomorrow. So we can figure out what their problems are. We can build companies to address them. So let's do that. And we partnered with the Economic Development Authority in New Jersey. We put up $6 million. They put up about $6 million to build a fund, which is our fund one, to build companies. And we're putting $1 million into $1 million each into 10 companies over the next 4 to 5 years, where every company has a corporate partner on day one that's saying, I will be your customer if you complete A, B, and C. And we're trying to make sure every company has an 18-month roadmap to that first license, to that first sale. So we're not really looking at like therapeutics or medical devices, but we have a venture studio team, which is myself and 2 other individuals within NJI. We have an external investment committee that we work through, and then also an advisory board of experts across a bunch of different industries that we work through. So we have that group. We have our board of directors for NGI that's also looking at all of these activities, which is 17 industry experts. And then there's board of trustees for NGIT too that looks at them. So we have a big governance structure in place, a lot of people at the table, but we're relatively nimble being an NGI with our investment committee to look at ideas. But once we get through those checks within our governance structure, we're writing checks directly from our fund.
And are all the portfolio companies coming directly out of NGIT? Or are you
we would like for that, but we don't have it mandated. So if Rutgers University or Princeton or whomever had an idea that made sense, we would go for it. If there was a corporate partner as well who says, we have this thing on the shelf, we'd like to use a startup to build it, let's do that. Because that's a unique value proposition we didn't quite recognize at first, is there's plenty of companies where they know something they're not the best equipped to take to market. They know it's valuable. We're not innovative. We can't take this thing to market, but you guys can build a company with us. We'll put up money. We'll put up resources. We'll give you support to make it happen. Let's do it together. So we've had a bunch of corporations approach us with that. They have a great asset in the shelf, but they do not have the wherewithal to get it to market, or they'd like to build a company, but they don't even know how to build a for-profit company from scratch, hire a CEO, hire a CTO. So we're helping with that, is building a company as a service through our venture studio.
Wow. Fantastic. I mean, credit to state of New Jersey for getting this off the ground and investing in it. And it sounds like they're really fortunate with your leadership because you're doing a great job. Give me a sense that you're driving this thing in the right direction. If we can come back to your time as a PhD student, and so and I think you said his name was Tom.
Yep.
Decided to co-found. If you could share your experience with our audience of what it was like from inception to sale, key lessons learned, anything you would never do again. What were some of the big takeaways?
The way I met Tom was I was doing my PhD and I was doing it on biofuels. So trying to take algae, like the green pond scum you see, and turning it into biodiesel. And we're working on a bunch of technologies in that space. And my PhD advisor said, there's a chemistry student across the street who's also doing his PhD on medicinal products from algae. You should go talk to him. So I went over to go talk to him, and I'm telling him about my research. And he basically said, like, oh, that's all stupid. I have this really cool thing we should do together. And like, I never met the guy. And he starts telling me about this chemical reagent he invented for making things clear. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? So he shows me this vial that had like a flower in it that was totally transparent. And then he showed me a mouse brain that was totally transparent. And I was like, at first, it didn't even dawn on me what it was or how it would work or where it would apply. But I was like, this is super cool. Let's work together on this. And he had started selling it as a microscopy reagent for folks to look at plants on microscopes. And over about 2 years during our PhDs, while we were doing our core PhD work, we realized that this technology had huge value in the histopathology space for helping pathologists look at tissues. And we could answer questions that you just couldn't answer with traditional two-dimensional histopathology. And so we started building from there. Like we tried everything. We did a Kickstarter to see if people would like buy transparent art from us. We talked to hundreds and hundreds of researchers and different people to see where this technology fit in. So we had a solution looking for a problem and ultimately found it. And we started selling reagents to researchers from around the world, just sending out hundreds of bottles of free reagents. And we built software to analyze the data that we can now get from imaging tissues in 3D. But really what catalyzed our company was we were able to raise a $500,000 investment, a seed round investment from the Foundation Venture Capital Group in New Jersey. So their whole goal was to help folks get out of academia and launch life science companies. So it was like the perfect fit. We got money while we were PhD students. We built our own lab while we were PhD students at an incubator within the state. And from there, we were selling reagents and kits. And quickly, big pharma companies started reaching out to us and saying, we don't want to buy your reagents for like $200. We want to do projects with you guys and have you do research. And they said, well, we'll pay you for it. Like, well, how much? Well, we'll give you like $100,000 or $200,000 to these projects. And we quickly realized that for us, what made most sense was not selling reagents and kits and bottles that we made in our basement, but doing research projects. So we built ourselves into a legitimate contract research business, helping all top 20 pharma companies in the world doing research projects. And we eventually got to the point where we did, I think, 200 different pharma companies, all different sizes, helping them answer different research questions, everything from COVID to Zika to cancer and oncolytic viruses. I mean, we worked on everything. It was cool because we got to see all different types of research programs. And it's all the early super cool stuff like 10 years before it gets to market that we were working on and trying to help pharma companies understand which drugs to take into clinical studies, which ones not, which ones to kill. So we built that up for the two of us in a closet at Rutgers until about 45 people or so by 2021. And then we went through the sale process and we sold the company to a publicly traded Swedish company. But along the way, I mean, plenty of pain and plenty of trials and tribulations. We didn't raise a lot of money, so we raised about $1.3 million in total. We did about $5 million in NIH and NSF funding, so we got a lot of non-dilutive funding. This is like generative AI, so we were writing hundreds of grants a year to try and get free money from the government to help us subsidize our research and growth as a company. And ultimately, I mean, it was very successful. We were profitable almost from the first year of the company throughout our sale. But along the way, we were pretty good at not making any big mistakes. We made lots of little mistakes. I mean, we had to learn everything. Like we were both scientists, so marketing, sales, BD, contracts, licensing, like everything we had to learn from scratch. None of us were experts in any of that. And throughout the process, we made lots of little mistakes. We're fortunate not to make any big, huge mistakes. But the only thing I'd say, probably looking back, is just getting mentors earlier in the process. We were able to find, like 2 years in the business, a mentor in particular who had done the whole thing. He started a contract research business, sold it for a giant 8-9 figure exit, and he was able to be our guiding mentor and tell us exactly when we were doing dumb things and should change direction. And he was awesome. So any feedback I'd give to folks is make sure you find someone who's done exactly what you're trying to do when you start. And it's not like somebody who's like a entrepreneur or an expert in your space, like literally the guy or girl who actually has done it. They just save you so much time and effort and money.
What, as you reflect back, what do you remember what drove the decision to exit and not stick with it?
It was a bunch of things. 2020, we started the year off, we were crushing it. So like this is pre-COVID. My wife was 7 months pregnant at the time. So like beginning of 2020. And then all of a sudden, we were working with Moderna in 2019. We knew COVID was going to happen like 3 months before anybody else. And at the time, we like didn't know how bad it was going to be until probably like January of 2020. We knew the whole world was going to shut down. And we started seeing it like the second week of March. And then by the third week of March, everyone pulled their contracts. So we went from having huge amounts of revenue to like zero overnight. And I pulled our whole team together and I said, guys, here's how much cash we have in months of cash. And here's Tesla, here's Apple, like here's GE. And I showed the whole team. I was like, either we're going to make it through it, or everyone in the US will be digging ditches in 3 months. So here's where we are. And what we decided to do is double down on R&D. We built a bunch of new tools. We built a bunch of new things. I basically said, we're not laying anybody off. We're going to figure out how to make the company more valuable. And in 3 or 4 months, either like this whole thing's going to collapse, like everything's going to collapse, or we're going to be in a good spot. And that was the way we viewed the world. In June of 2020, some consultant must have told every pharma company, you can't bring your people back, like pay them to do nothing, but you can work with contract research organizations. And on like a Friday, every single pharma company in the world called us and said, we need a ton of stuff and we need it now. And business just absolutely went through the roof. And we had a bunch of cool tools we developed in that time period. So we were set up for just explosion, and we started growing. And if you remember back to COVID and like New Jersey and a lot of more authoritarian states, they were deputizing the state police to go around and take people's stuff. So they got rid of illegal search and seizure. So they could come by our lab and take gloves, take pipette tips, put us out of business. They didn't do it, but at a period of time, we were hiding gloves in our drop ceiling. We were hiding pipette tips in our drop ceiling. And you go through that, went through the Great Resignation. I got to a point where I was just like, I'm done with this. Like things were in our control. They became completely out of our control. And I realized one morning that we were in a bubble. And I went to my co-founder and I was like, dude, we're not this smart. Like we're doing great. We're killing it. We're growing at crazy growth rates, almost like 100% a year, but we're not this bright. This market's a bubble. And it took a little bit to buy it, but he's like, you're right. We are in a bubble and we should sell it. Because what I realized was even if we doubled in revenue in 5 years or tripled in 5 years, we would actually be probably worth less than we were today based upon how we were being valued. So we went to market and we got an awesome valuation and we were right. Looking back on it 4 or 5 years later, the valuation we get today, even if we're on the same trajectory, is probably less than we got back then. So for all those reasons, personal, just going through that experience and like being done with it, but then also realizing the bird in the hand versus two in the bush, there's a certain amount of money where it doesn't actually change your life anymore. And we got to that point where like some of our investors were like, well, how big of a boat do you want? It's like, dude, after some length of boat, it doesn't matter. And we got to that point where it's like, well, it's not really meaningfully change our life if we keep going. Why don't we take some chips off the table? And that's what we did. And I don't regret the decision at all. I mean, I think it was an awesome decision, but it was a tough one. There were a lot of like fights and arguments and a lot of investors not very happy. But it was the right decision in retrospect.
And were Tom and you aligned on the decision?
We were, at first we were not. So I came to him and said, we're in a bubble. He thought I was crazy. And then eventually the more we talked about it, the more I just showed him the math of like where we were going to go, what our trajectory looked like. He was still on the fence. And then we did start to see slowdowns in like Q1 of 21. And I was showing him like, dude, if our rate of growth declines, our revenue, our multiples will decline precipitously, even though we're still growing a lot. Because growing 50% versus growing 30%, valuations are way different. And he was like, all right, I get it. Let's do it. Let's take some chips off the table.
Well, kudos to you for approaching the decision very objectively. I mean, it sounds like there was some emotion involved, given the circumstances around the pandemic, but I think that's brilliant, because you're right. Who knows what's going to happen? Hindsight's always 2020. And having an understanding of market and unit economics is great.
Right.
Couldn't agree more. All right. So back to today. So now you're president. What are you bullish on? Obviously, AI is a big topic, but we know that the world is a lot larger than that. Would love to know what topics have your attention.
AI is, forefront for us. But 12 months ago, we set up an AI division within NJI to do AI work. And we had this question of like, well, where do you win in AI? Real estate, we felt like wasn't a great play because AI companies don't need real estate. Data centers, every state wants it, but it's because construction companies want the contracts. It doesn't actually build jobs. It jacks up electricity rates. Unless you're Texas and have cheap electrical, it doesn't make any sense to build one, yet everyone's doing it anyway. So we said, well, where do we add value? And the two places we looked at were small and mid-sized businesses. They know they need AI, but don't know where to get started. They even know what problems they have. They don't know how to address them. And then workforce development and upskilling. You have all these companies with employees that are becoming rapidly irrelevant in their skill set. And if you're an employer that makes your employees more relevant and more skilled, you're going to take the cake. And that's what we're trying to help with businesses, is really focusing on business first, of going into, I was just this morning, a construction company, $100 million plus business, but they're looking at themselves and saying, in our space, other people are adopting AI. We don't really know how to, but we think it can add a lot of value here. So we're having cost overruns. We're having project managers that aren't hitting deadlines. We want to know 2 months before, and we think AI can predict that for us. And it can. So we're helping them build solutions for that we can actually deploy in construction. We're doing the same thing in law enforcement and healthcare. And these are things that they're not super sexy or super cutting edge, but it's like, how do I make sure that this 100 hours of work that I do every week, I can cut down, or I can do it with no mistakes, or I can do it better and provide better guidance, or I can just make my whole team more efficient. So very bullish on that. For us, these are small 5 and 6 figure projects that we're doing for all sorts of businesses. They add a tremendous amount of value. And even for Fortune 100 companies, you might have 1,200 people in your IT department, but you might have 1 computer scientist or 2. And those companies aren't great either at adopting or building new tools. There's not a lot of stuff you can pull off the shelf. And then you also don't want to go to like your Deloitte or Accenture or pay millions of dollars for something you don't need to pay that much money for. So we're super bullish on that. We're nimble, we're fast. We're able to pull in faculty and tons of students from our Young College of Computing to help with that, as well as our high performance computing at the university to help businesses with that in New Jersey. So very bullish in that area. I think it's tough to say elsewhere where we'd be bullish, because AI itself is affecting so many different industries. It's affecting finance. It's affecting literally every single aspect of the industrial verticals. It's impacting. The one area we're actively digging into now, and it's still preliminary for us, but we're probably going to launch a division in the blockchain and crypto space. The DeFi thing is becoming huge and mainstream, and a lot of the big banks you see like poo-pooing it, and you come to find out that no, they have internal research teams that are doing it and are adopting DeFi, and they're trying to have the smaller banks not hire talent away. That is catching fire. And we're looking at stablecoin development. We're looking at trying to help folks actually adopt these tools, especially like point of sale commerce, so dropping fees for credit card payments, a whole bunch of different things that we're looking at. But for us to go in and help small and mid-sized businesses with blockchain, but then also on the government side, because we are trying to help the government with these things, helping with real estate transactions, law, all sorts of different data processes and storage as well. So that's probably the next thing that we're going to be jumping into as an organization.
Well, I agree on all points.
Good.
Yeah, I know. I think, given how unique artificial intelligence is, I find that there's maybe a tendency to look for really big problems, not realizing that it's so new. You can be very pragmatic and find a whole host of problems to solve, whether it's construction, accounting, finance, take your pick.
Right.
And then, yes, it's interesting. I was recently listening to a podcast, and the guest was just talking about their opinion that actually crypto was bigger topic than AI. In so much as, from an investment perspective, I know there's a lot of people out there who have an opinion that the existing incumbents, like Meta, Apple, Google, have a material advantage just given their balance sheet and what they can do. I don't know that that's a foregone conclusion, but within the crypto space, just given the size of payments, not only us but the rest of the world, you'd better have a really good reason if you're not going to give it your attention. Michael, it's been a great podcast. Before we wrap up, words of advice, life lessons you'd share with yourself if you had a chance to go back and have a conversation when you were younger, or just for our audience at large?
feedback I was echoing before a little bit is around the mentorship. I've been so fortunate in my life to have great mentors throughout. When I was playing football in high school and college, I had great coaches and strength coaches, and in business, I wish I had gone sooner and found somebody who could help me do what I want to do. And I tell everybody, there's plenty of people around you, no matter where you live, within an hour or 5 minutes, of millionaires or billionaires that are more than happy to help you. It's just nobody reaches out to them and asks for help. I mean, I ask them for money or saying, hey, I want to do what you did, or I want to learn from you. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? People are more than happy to help out. Just very few people actually ask that question. And that's something that I've really leaned into the older I get, especially older folks who I can look to, who are 10 years older than me. I can learn from them of like the ghost of Christmas yet to come, of like, what are things that I don't know that are on the horizon. But mentorship is critical. And now I'm at the point in my life where I'm starting to help out other people as well and giving back versus just taking from folks that are older than myself. So that is critical. If you don't have a mentor or don't have a group of people you can go to with that kind of stuff, you got to. We've never been more isolated as a society than we are today. And having somebody who gives you real talk and real truth and like you can actually have an honest conversation with is more important than ever, especially somebody you know where they're coming from and they're where you want to go.
That's brilliant advice. I couldn't agree more. And so with that, anyone on the career, maybe a mentor who you'd like to give a shout out to, who's had a material positive impact?
I have to give a shout out to my wife. So she's 8 months pregnant with our third kid, and it's been almost 20 years of us together. So I have to give a shout out to her. She's always been there and always been my number one cheerleader. So yeah, shout out to her.
What's her name?
Cassandra.
Fantastic. And congratulations to Cassandra for expecting. I understand this is going to be number 3. That's awesome. And yes, very, very fortunate to have an amazing wife myself. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Excellent.
Michael, if there are any of anyone in our audience who'd like to get a hold of you or learn more about the Institute, how can they find you?
So njii.com. I'm also over YouTube, Instagram, all other socials as well if you want to follow me there. But njii.com is the best place to get started.
Fantastic. And again, for the benefit of our audience, Michael Johnson, President, New Jersey Innovation Institute. Got it right. That's fine.
Awesome.
Again, I'm your host, Christian Marquez, CEO, founder of FinStrat Management. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Innovators Investors Podcast. Take care. Christian Marquez here. Thank you so much for listening to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. If you're a successful founder or an investor who would like to be on the podcast, please visit podcast.finstratmgmt.com/podcast-guest. If you've got something out of this interview, please share this episode on social media. If you know someone that would be a great guest, please tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Innovators and Investors. I'd love to see your posts and suggestions. We're regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you catch each new episode, please subscribe to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. And your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and it means a lot to me and my team. Would you like to know more? Go to our website, finstratmgmt.com, or follow us on LinkedIn or on X. Our handle is @finstratmgmt. This is Christian Marquez. Thank you for listening. Until next time.